This hour, and two gentlemen sitting in the hot seats of the Situation Room. The senator in the Republic of Kenya from Makueni County is Dan Maanzo.
Yes,
I've been taught, and I'm a good student.
Yeah.
He's here with us this morning. Suba Churchill is the executive director of the National Civil Society Centre, also joining us in the hot seat this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Karibu sana.
Yes.
To both of you.
Okay.
We're having conversations about headlines to headlines, the things that we're seeing happening in the country on a daily basis. And over the last month, really, there's been just back to back to back. And if anything to go by, even as here at the Standard Group, the headlines that we've been putting out in terms of the things that have been happening have been quite something that have gotten everybody, riled up, but still important to look at in terms of those stories. So thank you both of you for being here. Before we get into our conversation this morning, Dennis has been in Ethiopia the whole week, and he's brought back Proverbs from Ethiopia.
Yes.
He'd like to share this one for today, and we'd like to hear interpretations of it.
Yes, and Ethiopia says they have the Ark of the Covenant in one of the churches there. So if you want to have a glimpse of that, just go to Ethiopia. But as well, they say they have better coffee than Kenyans. But Kenyans, as always, say we have better coffee than them. We equally say we have better athletes than them. But to keep on fighting for more gold medals whenever we have all these races across the world. And our proverb of the day today: no one washes their hands with only one finger. No one washes their hands with only one finger. I'll start with you, Suba. How would you...
I thought you were going to start with me.
You're closer to me. Yeah, how would you interpret that?
Yeah, I mean, I would interpret it to mean that unity of purpose enables us to achieve our goals. That if you have a goal you want to achieve, we'd want to see the kind of unity that we've been seeing with the young people, the Gen Z, so to speak. They have done a commendable job, bypassing some of the divisions that have been used in the past to profile us and profile political leaders, and we'd want to see that unity continue. And so I think the Ethiopian proverb can be seen within the context of our current situation, where with unity we can achieve what we purpose to achieve.
Okay.
Yes, this is similar to Kindole Kimoja Kivunji Chawa, meaning that there's nothing you'll do on your own. Just one finger. Can you imagine washing hands? You need the 10 fingers, not just one finger.
Yeah.
It means you need to be united. You need to be together to achieve, and that's the reason that God said, "Fill the earth." There are people everywhere on earth. You would imagine if it was still Adam and Eve just on earth. So when you are together, there are many ways you will help each other. There are many ways you'll be able to achieve together.
Yeah. And if you look even in countries that have bigger populations, the economy tends to perform even better. So
Indeed it does. So in the month of May, a number of things happened, and in the month of May we saw that there was death. There was a murder of a member of parliament, Charles Nyamweya, and that happened. In the month of May also, there was also the inquest into the two brothers who were killed at the hands of the police many years ago. The inquest still continues. Also in the month of May, then, there were attacks that happened in Transmara, and people were killed, and people were maimed, and people were injured. We get into the month of June, and Albert Ojwang was murdered at the hands of police again. And things happened after that. Two gentlemen then, again, last seen in the hands of police, were abducted, tortured, and their bodies were found. And they went for post-mortem with some very ugly scenes of things that had happened to them. In the month of June, and then even before that, we had seen that one gentleman, Brian Odhiambo, had disappeared, and there is an inquest going on in terms of where he is and what happened to him. We still don't have a body. If he died, neither do we have a living person if he has been returned. He's missing. All of these things have happened, and we're at the middle of and many, many more that I have not mentioned have happened. And the headlines continue to tell us a certain thing. If we look into the conversation that we are having this morning, and I'm just going to use the headlines from the Standard this morning. I mean, look at what we're talking about. Killed by police, blood on their hands, tortured, strangled, killer squad boss, fury against Lagat, big fish free, small ones fried, Lagat unmoved, shameless top cops, no, just resign. Headlines to headlines to headlines to headlines to headlines tells the picture of what's happening in the country at the moment. And then we have to ask ourselves, where are we sitting in the middle of all of this? Then, as though we were feeling as though it was safe to get out of the water, the protests then, in commemoration of the previous protests, happened on Wednesday, the 25th of June. Yesterday, we heard a couple of things. From Parliament, we did hear very clearly that, you know what, essentially this has all been whittled down to a political contest where people were then going to use their money to rile up things. We heard that from the Deputy President that this was one of the worst cases of anarchy that the country had ever seen. In fact, I believe he called it the worst, not one of the worst, the worst. And this is the situation in which we are in today. And we have to ask the question that in the sea of all of these headlines that we are seeing, what direction are we really going? And we'll start off with you, Suba.
Yeah, before even the Gen Z, the memorial protest by Gen Zs, I had discussed with a colleague and said, what this country needs is a de-escalation. A de-escalation because if we continue on this path, then we stand the risk or run the risk of getting into more chaos and more deaths. You have already seen that the number of deaths keep on increasing. We started off with 6, then before that there were 8, now we are talking of 15. And there was even talk of some bodies lying at the Quickmart supermarket around the OTC area. I do not know whether they have since been removed, but when I passed there last evening, I saw police on standby. But there have been that talk in town about those bodies. So we could be talking about, the number of deaths in their 20s or 30s, and more so after we get full reports. I was particularly a bit disappointed by the statement issued by my good friend Murkomen. Murkomen consulted for civil society before he joined politics, and I remember even when he decided to go and run, we collected some small amounts, whatever we could raise, because we perceived him to be part of us, to support his bid. So he's a friend in that context, and of course, our peer and so on. I was a bit disappointed because we expected a de-escalation. It's the duty of government to de-escalate. We cannot, be in competition with young people who naturally would be idealistic, of course very enterprising, and a bit disappointed, if not thoroughly disappointed by the goings on. The concerns that the young people have raised are very legitimate. They have concerned about promises that were made but which are not being fulfilled. Mm-hmm. They have raised concern about government programs that does not seem to place people at the center, because development is about people. And when you are, when we were young growing up in Jericho, here in Nairobi, our parents would take us to hospital. And they would insist that you must be injected. So whatever they decided was good for you, because you were a child. Now, this government seems to treat all Kenyans as though they were children, that they know what is good for them, and that they have no say, and even if they say it, government will trash whatever you say. So there's a sense in which the very people who broke the walls of Kasarani Sports Ground, you remember during the swearing in?
Yeah.
Yes.
The support that this government had was overwhelming, so much so that there were people who, out of fear that they would be locked out, walipita na gate, as the young people say. So the question that this government needs to ask is, where did they get it wrong, so that the very people who are, their foot soldiers, who are their keyboard warriors, because I remember even when the opposition, Azimio, held the first round of protests in 2023 for electoral justice, a lot of these young people who are today protesting against the Kenya Kwanza government were its fiercest defenders.
Yes.
And they were keyboard warriors who dismiss anything that Azimio said. Now today, those people have made a 360-degree turn and are wishing even the government away. In fact, ready to occupy State House and do all manner of things. And so I would encourage that, if we really want to get back on track, because we are off the track, then as a country we must de-escalate, and the government must lead in that de-escalation. We have had proposals from the government itself during the peak of the 2024 protest. President William Samoei Ruto did indicate that he was willing to lead the nation in a conversation, in a national conversation. And more recently, when they had some MOU with the opposition, a section of the opposition, let me clarify, because I know my brother here is not part of it. Then there was also that understanding that, the 10-point agenda would help to de-escalate things and specifically refocus the nation on addressing certain critical governance issues.
Suba, you've raised matters to do with a broad-based government that one would have hoped would have come through to address some of these issues, because remember, these came a few months after the June 25th, 2024 protest. But even as we sit here today and we try to find what is exactly happening, there is the feeling that the government is tone deaf on what is happening in the country. You find these aside from the president calling the Gen Zs treasoners, individuals, immediately after June 25th, 2024, you hear the statements that has been made by the cabinet secretary, even giving an order to shoot to kill, and one asks, as who? Do you have that kind of power? But then, Maanzo, you've actually also been mentioned as being behind these protests that happened recently. Just where do we lie as a country with regard to listening to what is being said and addressing the problem?
I want to say that first and foremost.
First of all, any part of it, do you organize the protest?
No. That's what I want to respond to. I want to say the fact that Junet Mohammed, on behalf of the government and on behalf of Parliament, because he's the one who moved a motion, but then went on to talk of the motion, the fact that he says I organized the protest, that means everything else he said was so misguided. The people of Makueni know me very well, that I don't organize protests, but we teach them their rights, the Constitution. No one can suspend the Constitution, including the protesters, including Murkomen. No one. The Constitution of Kenya is a social contract owned by everybody. And that's why under the Constitution of Kenya, elections are held after 5 years. They've got even a specific date. And if you lose in an election, then you should go home. But that's not what we have heard of late. As we have heard quite a number of people associated with Junet say that the government will go nowhere, and say that there is no president who has served for one term. It is the Constitution which dictates on the people, and say that they will not hand over power to the opposition. I want to tell Junet that I did not organize any protests in Makueni, nor did I ship people to Nairobi. I did actually receive a phone call a day before the protest from young people purported to be Gen Zs, and I engaged them on phone, and I realized they are not Gen Zs, because the way they wanted to operate, that's not how the Gen Zs operate. Kenyans must know this is what Gen Zs want. First of all, you cannot go into a bank with a line, and Gen Zs are there, and you purport to overtake the queue. They'll throw you out of the bank. If you are driving on the road, the laws of Kenya only know the president, the ambulance, and the fire engine. Everybody else is not supposed to go the opposite way of the road, or to do another thing. The law knows only those three. And so if you try also to overtake, the Gen Zs will block you until you queue like any other person. The Gen Zs look for justice. And in fact, the Gen Zs don't ask for money to go for protests. So that's how that team failed. And I did not send them any money. And I told them I doubted whether they were Gen Zs. So they pestered me a little bit. They call again and again. And I blocked their number. Now, if those are the people I'm supposed to have shipped to Nairobi, then Junet and his government are so mistaken. The same way they have mentioned other people. I can assure you the recent trends of Kenyans. When Matiang'i went to Kisii, in fact, he was being called from Nairobi, and he was thinking maybe he needs to mobilize people. And when he went to Kisii, the people mobilized themselves. No one was paid in those rallies you saw in Kisii to attend. And similarly, I am very doubtful whether anybody has been... In fact, you cannot mobilize such crowds by money. But the current government believes, you should pay people to be able to make a crowd. And that's what they've been doing, by using government money to pay people to make a crowd. I'm very surprised by the comments of Murkomen, who is a young man I trust very much. He also consulted with cooperatives. Those days as a young lawyer. And he is one of my friends, and that time I was a secretary at the Ministry of Cooperatives, and he used to come by and we'll introduce him to cooperatives and we'll give him some work, and he will do a very good job in explaining what cooperatives do and things like that. So I'm surprised, our juries too should know. In fact, the story in Makueni shooting, the truth better be known, and this is where the government is going wrong. It was done by plainclothes people who had a Subaru, and they just shot randomly. Initially killed 2, and later on another young man was found dead in one of the sewers there.
These are eyewitness accounts, Senator?
No, this is eyewitness account. Information I've gotten because I've got my, people who work for me, the office of the Senate, and who happen to have seen exactly what happened. So and the families are in touch with me. They have been given a very difficult time, even to move the bodies. Similarly to the families with people with the gun, bullets stuck in their bodies. They are being given very funny procedures which are not in any law. Being told you need, for you to be treated by a doctor or for you to be operated on, you need some police document. There is nothing like that. A doctor is supposed to save life. So and it's similarly, it's very difficult, even from previous cases, for postmortem to be done on those people. And the police does everything to make another story and to cover up and to say the bullet was not the one. In the previous case of a young man shot in Mali, luckily the people picked the bullet and gave it to Mutula Kilonzo Jr. And they were unable to be done postmortem on till Mutula Kilonzo intervened by looking for, the top police bosses. And that's the situation Kenyans are living on. So when I see lies in Parliament, I get surprised by Junet. I get surprised by Boss because the former Chief Justice was only with the widows and also mothers who have lost children. They have been walking to every office day by day looking for justice. The only public inquest we have seen on Rex Masai and the other 2 you have mentioned, a very bad cover-up is going on there. And the real witnesses who saw, the person who killed Rex Masai is known. So there's no need to go around about it. The gun used to kill Rex Masai is known. And all those ballistics can be produced.
So if things like this are known, then why is it so difficult to have something done in terms of prosecution, in terms of charge, in terms of calling to court for justice to be served? Because this is the thing. If things are in the open, they are right there. We know. If you're saying, Senator, that we know, then why don't we have legislative bodies? There's
a lot of information with the people, and there are many people willing to give evidence. But unfortunately, the government institutions are compromised. The police, which is supposed to collect evidence, collects very weak evidence, which cannot sustain a conviction. DPP, which is supposed to prosecute, you know that our constitution gives a lot of power to the DPP. Even when you prepare for private prosecution, they can take it over and terminate it. And therefore, there has been no goodwill from the government in seeking justice for those who have suffered, for where police have misbehaved. The case of Matu, I was called immediately after it happened by somebody who knows me from there and said these young people were just passing by the police station. Then an officer decides to fire bullets on them. So after they're fallen, the rest of wananchi now get upset and now come for the police post. What I want Murkomen and company to know is that the sovereign power of this country belongs to the people.
I would like us to take a listen to what the CS said yesterday. Then it gives us context to then be able to move a few steps in this conversation. So just listen to that.
The headlines for the last 2 months or 3 months have always been about security and insulting people without resorting at one instance to ask for feedback from anybody, not even any person. Now they have these interesting headlines that pass judgment on the Inspector General of Police, the Minister, the President. Of course, the President lives on their headline. The question of closing or not closing depends on the circumstance. You have to weigh between national interest and also the individual interests of media houses. The national interest at any given time will be weighed. And if it's necessary to close a media house so that you can serve the nation, of course you do it.
Ile shida yenye inafanya hata polisi za ingine ipige wakora risasi ni kwa sababu wanashikwa, wanaenda, wanarudi, wanakuja kuchekelea polisi kuambia sasa tulifika wapi, hakuna penye tumeenda. Ni ukweli. Na tumeambia polisi mtu yoyote mwenye atakaribia police station piga yeye risasi.
So that was very clear.
Yeah.
So that could be the reason why we heard what you said, Senator.
Now,
that
a police
atapitia
karibu na police station.
Okay.
Now, I want to say that is very wrong. And we have had a lot of reckless statements from some of the government officers. We have had reckless statements from a leader of majority of National Assembly and leader of majority of Senate. We've had talk of impunity. You can see the good people who had gone to be around Murkomen were very upset with him and even told him one time on his face. Because he knows very well as a lawyer what he say cannot happen. A police station is supposed to be a place of refuge. When you get into trouble, the people who should assist you are police officers because they are security officers. But unfortunately now, the police stations are the ones which have become the places you will go for refuge. Then you get killed. And when you get killed in a police station, people want to say there was no killing. You hit your head on the wall and died. And then yet the postmortem report, even from the government pathologist, show this person has beatings from toe, to the head. And dies out of assault. There's somebody must be brought to book in that circumstance. And again, there was a young man from Makueni who had done the CCTV, and he gets arrested for 12 Subarus at his home at 2 a.m. So when he is arrested, he's taken and he says, you see, I got threatened and I was told you are the one who did the CCTV, delete it. But he knew, even if you just do a mere deletion, there are so many backup systems, the video is still there. So later on, he defended himself and said, the video is still there. So why are you arresting me?
So, Wakili, as we talk about what is happening in the country and even the statements being made by the the Minister for Interior, there is also what the Constitution says: sovereign power belongs to the people, and they can exercise this right either directly or indirectly. The Constitution grants Kenyans right to go picket and demonstrate peaceably. So, the police are mandated to protect protesters once they've received the notification. The IG and the command commander agreed and told Kenyans that they indeed had received the notification. Then there is the right to information. So when you hear the cabinet secretary making all these statements, just what does this do to a country that is already this hurt and angry with regard to what is happening from the governing class?
Yeah, first of all, this second wave of protests are a creation of government itself. For some time, the Gen Zs have been somehow struggling to get back to the street. Many are the occasions when Morara Kebaso, for example, called a rally in Uhuru Park. The turnout was very poor. They have occasionally, made announcement. But then Eliud Lagat happens. And out of nowhere, acts completely out of context, overreacts to a situation whose context we are yet to understand. I'm told you people are also victims here. You hosted GSU officers who came to establish whether indeed the standard, because you seem to be in the crosshairs of the political elite. All this happening, and then you ask yourself whether before somebody is promoted up to that level, whether their emotional intelligence, because I think when you act in the manner in which Lagat did, is of course the DIG, and of course Masengeli is not different. We also saw the drama around Masengeli and the Kitengela, four. Then you wonder whether what kind of interview do these people go through, because by the time you reach that level, right from the officer commanding station, I was looking at the face of Talam, who is now in custody, and I was seeing a father who should now be looking at things from the rear view mirror, not just the windshield. Because young people tend to look at things through the windshield. And so I asked myself, why would a DIG visit all this upon a government that is part of a society that he should be protecting, and so on and so forth? There was this action of getting Albert Ojwang arrested, all the way from his village home in Kakoth, in Homa Bay County, and transport. Was reckless, in my view. And we have not, as a public, been told this is the post that led to this, because his X account seems to have been deleted. And as they say, one thing led to another, and now we are talking about the late Albert Ojwang. So we have had this situation, first of all, precipitated by a very senior government official, and government should acknowledge, yes, it is wrong for young people to have whoever it is who touched police stations in Kikuyu, I think also in Nyandarua and so on. It is criminal. Those who may have looted, I passed next to OTC, and the small scale business people, young women and men trying to eke a living, are now jobless. And so we do not want to see a Gen Z protest that leads to joblessness. We want, because part of their grievance is that there is unemployment. Yes. And so they need to also help us to protect the few who have jobs. But when people in government, and I started getting worried before the protests themselves, when we were getting conflicting information. You have rightly pointed out that the regional commandant acknowledged, I think he's called Mr. Seda, acknowledged that they had received a notification as required under the law, and that they would protect. But then comes government spokesman, Isaac Mwaura, who says there'll be no such thing, that, people, whoever wants to condole with the families can do it at their own home. I mean, that was heartless. You do not, as a government spokesman, you do not talk in that manner and in that tone, as if 60 people are as few to warrant people condoling with the families and so on, and observing and laying wreaths at their own homes.
But it seems that there is a message that's being passed here, and we're not just hearing what they're saying. They're saying something very clearly.
Yeah.
They're saying something, and I don't know how it's. I feel that when somebody opens their mouth to say something, that we should actually hear what they're saying. That you may talk about 60 people, Suba. You may talk about issues that people have brought to the fore in terms of a protest, and they have said that we have issues with governance, we have issues with the debt, we have issues with the lack of this, that, the other thing. We have issues with poor governance. We want those things to be addressed. We will you to do better. We feel that we're overtaxed and underserviced. But when the answer that comes out of the mouth after a protest is that if you come near a police station, we will shoot you. When the answer that comes about is that you must, stick to the law. When the answer that comes from some of those things is that, well, we're going to do everything we can to protect the nation. They're telling you something, and we just don't seem to be hearing what it is that they're saying. They're saying something. They are.
Definitely. Of course, when Isaac Mwaura, spoke the way he did, you, as a government spokesman, you must have gotten the instructions from somewhere. I don't know how that office operates. Unfortunately, everyone who has served in that office, including Alfred Mutua, they always, there's something about them. I don't know whether it's about them or about the office that makes them speak things that are not even sensible. But then you get a sense that they are instructed, or perhaps they are given the content, and it's done for them, and they
or
just.
That there is a script.
There's a script. So when I saw him speak, then I said, Gen Zs are being set up. The police is saying this on the other hand. The government spokesman is saying this on the and as if to supersede whatever the police spokesman, the police officer had said, and the officer who spoke, he was the regional commander in charge of the whole city, and who acknowledged that he has received a notice. So I could clearly see that the demonstrations were not going to be peaceful. There was a bit of some pretense of restraint, I must admit. But when the TV stations were switched off, then I started fearing for the worst. That what is it that they do not want the public to see? And you see, access to information during protests is one of the key principles of government's role in promoting, protecting, and facilitating protests. Because you who maybe is not part of the protest would want to know what is happening out there. So that in case you are driving in the way of the protest, you may want to take another route and avoid, a direct confrontation with the protesters. You do not want to be caught, for example, in the crossfire, stray bullets. Remember the poor guard somewhere around Ngara who was found killed. I suspect probably a stray bullet, just fired carelessly by an officer at people. So you don't want to be caught in those situations. And that's why access to information becomes very, very critical. But what do we see? The Communications Authority becomes the jury, the judge, and executioner in his own case, and bypasses all due process and makes a decision after raising a complaint to itself. Comes to the conclusion that gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen of the press, you only have this number of minutes, and those of you who are not quick enough, who are quickly switched off air, and that for us as civil society actors is unfortunate, because the right to protest, over and above being, guaranteed under Article 37 of the Constitution, is a fundamental human right, which even if it was not in the Constitution, would remain a fundamental human right, internationally recognized under international human rights standards, and which Kenyans have been exercising. We attained independence partly because of protest. Citizens are the forebearers of this nation, and that's why the sovereignty you talked about earlier, comes to the fore and becomes very, very critical. But over and above, I still want to go back to my earlier point. It is time the government de-escalated. The tone I saw in the CS speech reminds me of the tone in His Excellency's speech immediately after, Parliament was breached. And the president was, later on reflected, apparently, and came back, now to address Kenyans as part and parcel of, the leadership that Kenyans put in place in 2022.
Maanzo,
and so we'd want to see the CS also, after the anger of yesterday, come back to the people and say, or the president now coming to override what the CS said and saying, we need a national dialogue, we need a national conversation, and we need to sit down as a people, because throughout our history as Kenya, we have always had opportunity and set aside our contestations and said, let us now have a national conversation and come up with practical solutions to some of these
with that
issues.
in place as well. There is what is being seen as though we are on our own. There is that feeling that the political class that you belong to, Dan Maanzo, feels as though we are on our own. And why am I saying this? You remember when the MP Charles Ngondo was killed and how fast-tracked the investigations took place. Here we're talking about 60 lives that were taken by the police 1 year later, and nothing tangible we've seen. We look at Albert Ojwang's death, and even statements that came from the House of Parliament. You remember Junet Mohammed saying, "Go and kill your son and mourn on your own." And mourn your own. You hear such statements, and Kenyans say, "But these people don't care about us. We are on our own. We'll fight our own fight." And right now, looks as though Kenyans, it has become a situation where it is us against them. How do we get out of that mess? It can't be it is Kenyans against the police. It can't be it is Kenyans against the political class. From the house that you belong in, being in politics, how do we have these conversations among yourselves and among Kenyans for us to find a solution?
I want to say that first and foremost, the government and even Parliament seems to have isolated itself from the people. They have very little information as to what is happening. If you hear the speeches on the floor of the Parliament yesterday in relation to the motion of Junaid Mohammed, first of all, Junaid Mohammed has lost. He's not in touch with the ground. He's not in touch with the people. He doesn't understand that no one sponsored this maandamano in any way. I heard them even accuse a church. I attended that church service at All Saints Cathedral. It had been organized by National Council of Churches. And this is the second anniversary. And all the families with missing children, there are so many families suffering. Dead children, people have been abducted. Many of them came and they gave their stories, not all of them. And even when some young man came in and protested, about the killing of the young man on the streets, or the shooting, of the young man who was a hawker. He came, he said prayers don't work. He was given his chance and the church allowed him to go. So at no point in that church service did I hear the clergymen incite anybody. They just read verses which reflect us. Like there was a reading of Habakkuk 1:2-4. A situation clearly like what we are having now, where the leadership, where justice, nothing prevails. And after that, they said you do a press conference outside the church, and you could see the feeling of the people. The Parliament, although was elected by the people and is supposed to be a reflection of the people, I want to say that the current Parliament has lost it completely. It is under total capture of the state. And the state also, you remember that after the first maandamano, the president said these are just criminals and, branded them. When you have a situation as you have, you must stop a little bit and think. If they were criminals, if all the people in 27 counties who went to the streets are criminals, then how will you prosecute them? What will you charge them? Do you have enough magistrates to prosecute them? Do you have enough system? So it means we have something else in place which must be dealt with by the leadership. Kenyans are very annoyed with the activities. When you say shoot and kill anybody who comes near a police station. So now somebody who has been robbed, how will they go and report to a police station who have been robbed and there's an order to kill and shoot? I think that was very careless. There's been very many careless statements which the state needs to rectify. You cannot say you'll never hand over power or you won't hand over power. You cannot say that no president has ever served one term. We must serve 2 terms by whatever means. Because the constitution is clear. So we all have a good constitution. No one wants to overrun the constitution. No one Kenyans wants to remove the constitution because the constitution is in place, and elections are held after every 5 years. What I want to urge Kenyans to do as part of what is possible to deal with this nasty situation. Number one, all these young people who are demonstrating, please, most of them are not registered as Kenyans. Please acquire an identity card which is free for now. Then there is going to be registration for elections. Register as a voter. Then upon registering as a voter, then vote. Remember, 8 million Kenyans did not vote. So the moment you sit on a day it is voting and you have a voting card, and you don't want to go and decide how you want your government to be, then later on you may have no one to blame. So please, Kenyans should now come out in large numbers as they come out to reject this government, vote against it, bring in a good government, and the country moves on. So the best solution I could give for the current government is to remove it. I'll tell you why. And you've heard the Honorable Badi talk about it, Ruth and the skunk, which is also now helping him carry. Now, those days, the things, it is true. The CSS and the PSS, we have a lot of incompetent people there. They come to Parliament, they appear in Parliament, in committees, they are unprepared, they have no idea. You know, President Kibaki used to promote the directors. People who've been working for civil service.
In those sectors,
they become the PSs. Somebody would rise from a DO to a DC to a PS, and they will understand very well how to run the government and how to advise the president. We have a useless, presidential advisors. People who have no idea what it is. Some of them just careless talkers. No one thinks that we need the nation. So the best way to deal with this is to remove this government through the votes. That's the best way. And I want to tell Junet Mohammed and the company, they are so misguided. They have no idea. The people of Makueni know me very well. I don't even buy a vote. And I don't buy people. You should convince people to vote for you because you are going to represent them properly. It is not how you come with money and bribe. I have no money to bribe anybody, and I have no money to buy anyone. And I did not sponsor a single incident in Makueni. And I want IPOA to investigate the 3 deaths in Emali in Makueni, the protests in Wote. And I want to say also, there are responsible policemen in this country. In Meru, the policemen moved with the people the way it's supposed to be. In Kitui, the policeman came and asked the people, what do you want us to do? And they demonstrated together, and there were no distractions. But if even the law is in place, we have very good laws from the Constitution to the Public Order Act, which is colonial. It says there must be proclamation. Give loud and clear. And give people enough time to disperse and go to their homes. But when people gather here in Kenya to protest, and they are just bypassing a police station, you shoot them. You provoke them. If you begin a protest and the first thing you get is a tear gas canister fired, then you are provoking the people. The problem of the current protests has been escalated by the police themselves, by the government, by misjudgment, and they must take responsibility. They have killed people. The kidnappings must stop. The killings must stop, and we must look for reparation of the people.
So, but I want to ask you this question, is that one of the issues that have come up quite often, just in line with what Senator is saying, is that the trust deficit in institutions that are supposed to carry out these processes then is an issue.
Yes.
That if you say certain things must change, constitutionally, the change is vested in institutions that have been given a constitutional mandate to do certain things. IEBC, IPOA, Parliament, the National Assembly, the Senate. And there is a lack of trust in those institutions. And this is where we see the clash, or the friction, or the frustration, whereby we can say, well, you know what you need to do? Go get an ID, vote, and then we'll be fine. The problem is that the systemized or the systemic issues that have been there for years continue to be there today. How do you undo the system? because that's what people are crying for. It's the system that is against you, and it's the same system that will say the things that we are talking about now, where we cry that why should you have somebody in the street who has a constitutional right to be there and then you shoot at them? It's a system issue. Why should we have 60 people dead at the hands of the ammunition from police and no question has asked? It's a system issue. The problems that have been brought to the fore, they are all systemic. How do you deal with that system?
Exactly. And you see, this is why, you know, and I like it when you start with the IEBC, because that's where it all begins. When we do not get our elections right, we never have had conclusive elections, I think, since 2002. The last time Kenyans went to the polls and felt that their vote had counted was in 2002. These subsequent elections, there'll always be issues, contestations, and demand for electoral justice. And we have seen it manifest in the form of protests immediately after the election, even after the Supreme Court, which some of us who were privileged to write the Constitution at Bomas thought would help resolve some of those issues, had spoken. People still felt that even that Supreme Court, you know, had not done the right thing. And we've seen what has been happening since 2013. You know, and you recall how, you know, President William Ruto, immediately after being elected, you know, constantly reminding the public that there'll be no nusumkati. What do we have today? So you are right in saying that, you know, all these things stem from political dysfunctionality. Yeah? He's been quoting my good friend. You know, I'm a friend to some of these politicians because we were with them in the trenches during the olden days when we were fighting for multi-partyism and so on. Jumanet Mohammed is a friend. But when you see him speak like that, it is out of political dysfunctionality. So much so that even when President Ruto swears almost by the Bible that there will be no, you know, nusumkate, he ends up establishing one even faster than those who have established such. So this political dysfunctionality leads to drift, constitutional drift. So we drift away from the constitution and the institutions that have been established. We had, in fact, a very good idea, and which is there in the constitution, about the Chapter 15 commissions, you know, constitutional commissions and independent offices. The whole idea was that as Kenyans demanded that we reduce the powers vested in the presidency, we had to find another mechanism of getting those powers exercised by pro-people institutions. Actually, constitutional commissions are people's institutions. But what do we see today? Apart from the first commissions that were established in 2013, increasingly we are seeing commissions whose occupants have misinterpreted their mandate to think that they are more government than the state itself, instead of seeing themselves as people's institutions. So the IBC will do everything it can to deliver to the whoever is incumbent, and if it so happens that they are defending their seat, you know, all these commissions. And apart from the EACC, there are a few that are doing a good job, like the EACC. In my view, you know, we are overwhelmed by corruption, so we don't quite see the good work they are doing. But I would sit here and tell you authoritatively that I'm ready to stand and defend EACC because we can see. But because we are overwhelmed by corruption, we do not quite able to quantify. The Kenya National Commission, trying what it can under very difficult circumstances. A lot of these commissions are underfunded, therefore, as part of a strategy to cripple them from delivering on their mandate, and a few others that I may cite. Indeed. But by and large, all these institutions, including Parliament, which my good friend is part of, have dysfunctioned, you know. They are part of the political dysfunctionality. Because if Parliament was the Parliament that it was supposed to be, they ought not to have taken off yesterday on the day of the protest.
In the they 5 meter wide.
Exactly. They should have been the people enjoying the confidence of the people as representatives of the people, directly elected by the people.
They should not be put in reservoir there.
Exactly, in the first place.
Barricaded from the very people and so on and so forth. And so it's a manifestation of political dysfunctionality. leading to the drift in constitutionalism that we see almost with every public institution that has been established.
That needs to definitely be sorted out, because things cannot continue like this, that's for sure. And that's one of the cries of the people. Dan Maanzo, Senator for Makwani County, has been here with us this hour, as well as Suba Churchill, who is Executive Director, Kenya National Civil Society Centre. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here this morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.